The siren was still ringing in my ears when they rolled him through the sliding doors, face swollen, breath scraping like sandpaper. A billionaire in a wheelchair staring down a very ordinary death because a triage nurse decided his legs made him less urgent. That's the part that gets you, right? All that money, all that power. And he's about to die under fluorescent lights because nobody will look up. And then a young woman with braided hair and a steady voice says, "That's enough. He's crashing." She tells the desk without flinching. "And if you're going to let him suffocate because he's sitting, not standing, I'm calling the head of emergency, and we're going to have a very loud conversation." You could feel the air change, the way it does when a storm picks a street instead of a town. And in that tiny shift, a life gets saved. 10 minutes later, epinephrine is in his arm. The tight ring around his throat begins to loosen, and the billionaire, Theodore Blackwell, 62. An empire built on steel and concrete, a life snapped in half by a car accident, keeps glancing toward the doorway like a man taking inventory of what matters. Which tonight seems to be the stranger who refused to sit back down. She's in the waiting room again, holding the hand of her elderly neighbor while he moans about a hip. And when Theodore asks for her, she comes in wary and ready. "I owe you my life," he says, gray eyes clear now, voice low, and she shrugs like the sky just did what skies do. Anyone would have done it. He offers a job the way men like him make decisions, quickly, decisively, like tossing a rope to someone already swimming. Caregiver, full benefits, housing if she wants it. "I'm not certified," she admits. "I care about character," he answers, and something in the room unlocks. The next morning, she's guiding that chair down marble hallways, Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper, muttering that the last 12 never lasted. And Theodore sits behind a desk like a judge who has run out of mercy. Crisp shirt, colder tone. "No pity," he says. "No friend, just the job." "Perfect," she says. "I'm good at the job." Day 3. She wheels him toward the terrace while he protests, and she's already opening the French doors. Morning heat on polished stone, jasmine climbing a trellis like it believes in second chances. "I eat in my study," he says, clipped. "Then we'll bring the study outside," she grins. And that's how it begins, tiny acts of defiance that feel like care. She reads contracts aloud when he can't find his glasses, and he tests her with clauses that have burned a dozen assistants. She doesn't blink. "Where'd you learn that?" "Paralegal for 2 years," she says, "until Mom got sick." She reorganizes his meds, moves his calls to the garden, slips a peace lily on his nightstand because a room should have something alive. He waits for the angle. Everyone has one, and she keeps failing to have it. "What do you want, Miss Thompson?" He snaps one morning, a little scared of being relieved. "For you to have a good day," she says, and means it, which is dangerous, because meaning it is how walls rot from the inside. 3 weeks in, she brings chicken and dumplings in a plastic container with a wrinkled grocery receipt taped on top, because trust needs proof on the first pass. He laughs at the receipt. "Let me back up a sec," he says later, voice softer. "Thank you. You're worth seeing," she replies, and it lands so deep he has to look away. He's known for months the kitchen cash drawer is light. He's let it slide because he understands the arithmetic of love and desperation, but nobody has said it out loud with that clean, non-judgmental tone. "People do what they must," Gabrielle says, and you can see him file the sentence somewhere important. Second twist knocks on the study door. Daniel Blackwell, younger brother. Same eyes, less armor, steps in and the temperature drops 10 degrees. 2 years of silence rush the room at once. "You look different," Daniel says cautiously. "People say you've been at the lake, the hospital, the farmer's market. It sounds like the world is getting you back." Theodore bristles. Gabrielle starts to excuse herself. He stops her, which is its own kind of confession. They circle old grievances, the rehab facility, the wife who left, the friends who stopped calling. And then, like a dam deciding to remember what water is for, the men find their way to honesty. "I was afraid," Theodore says, and Daniel says, "Me too." And they hug across a wheelchair like it's a bridge, not a barrier. And I swear to you, even the house exhaled. Momentum builds. The terrace becomes an office. The foundation he started years ago like a tax write-off wakes up under her questions. And one morning he calls his director with a voice that almost sounds young. "Full scholarships for future nurses, mentorships, placement support. Start big." Bigger, bet on talent, not birthright. Yeah, that happened. Applications flood in. Hospitals want a partner. Some reporter from the Times sniffs at a human interest angle. And while all that lifts, Gabrielle takes a call in the hallway. The kind that tightens your spine in 3 words. Overdue? Discharge, please. Theodore doesn't ask. He hires a private investigator who finds what any fool with eyes could have seen if they were willing to see. A daughter holding up the sky over her mother's cancer bed and still finding time to read 19th century novels out loud to a stubborn man in a navy blazer. What he does next is a lever move, silent and heavy. Anonymous funds erase a hospital ledger like chalk and rain. A scholarship appears from a foundation nobody's heard of with terms that spell out a future. Roses arrive for someone who brings light to dark places. No signature. The card smelling faintly of a man terrified to be known for the wrong reasons. 2 days later, she's in his study with shaking hands and a smile so bright it hurts. Bills gone, tuition paid. Miracles like buses, none for years, then 3 at once. And he keeps his face even because if he tells the truth now, it will feel like he bought something that should never be for sale. Of course, the truth doesn't stay quiet. It arrives one evening in a room lit warm, during stretches and small talk, when he can't stand the weight of it anymore. It was me, he says, and the sentence sits between them like a dropped plate. She turns to the window, eyes shiny, says nothing for the longest minute. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted your kindness to be free of my money, he says, which is both noble and naive, because secrets are debts with interest. I trusted you, she says, and he says you still can. And she says, it changes everything. And he says, it changes nothing. And they are both right in ways that don't cancel each other out. Here's where you expect the fairy tale to crack. Gratitude mistaken for love, power muddying choice. And to be honest, that's the alley they walk for a few tense days. But feelings have a way of telling on themselves. She blurts that she loves him, and then tries to stuff it back into her mouth. He tells her his love started the night she refused to let him die in a hallway. They argue about what accepting help does or doesn't corrupt. And eventually the thing in the room stops pretending it's shyness. He reaches for her hand. She lets him, and the silence feels less like a cliff and more like a porch. He doesn't propose with fireworks or a helicopter over the bay. He rolls onto the terrace where jasmine hangs heavy and city lights blink like patient stars, candles gutter in the breeze. And he sets a small velvet box on the table like a promise he's been writing for months. Before you answer, he says, voice shaking just enough to make it real, this isn't a transaction. It isn't gratitude dressed as romance. It's the only honest thing I have left. She asks whether he's sure, whether the world will chew them up and spit them out and call it concern. He answers like a man who has finally learned how to be simple. Yes, let them talk. Everything worthwhile is complicated. I want my whole life to be a collaboration with yours. She says yes. Not because of the ring, but because of the way he said, with, and when he slides it on her finger you can hear Mrs. Patterson sniffing into a napkin in the next room, like every suspicious heart has decided to be happy for 5 minutes. The program explodes, in the best way. First 100 scholars. Then hundreds more, partnerships that make sense. A mentorship mixer where a marketing associate falls in love with a nursing student, and they send a thank you note that makes Gabrielle cry in an elevator. And then the phone starts ringing louder. The Times again. A Sunday feature on philanthropy and power, whispered questions about the caregiver who became the wife. You know how people are. Always ready to decide your motives for you. They sit on the terrace the night the email lands. City humming below, ring catching candlelight. We could tell the story, he says. Own it before they twist it. Or we could let the works speak, she says, and let strangers argue with the results. In the distance, thunder mutters like a reminder that weather changes, and we all live under it. What do you think, he asks, and she smiles that steady smile from the emergency room. The one that says storms don't scare sailors, and she leans her forehead to his. I think we were never the point, she says softly. Second chances, and what we owe each other when we finally have more than we need.